And the analysis of Shields and Brooks, that is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Welcome, gentlemen. We've seen you earlier this week because something happened on Tuesday.
It did.
But we wanted you to come back on Friday. So before we talk about the election and the fiscal cliff, Mark, this bombshell today that CIA Director David Petraeus stepping down after acknowledging an affair, once the brightest light in the United States military.
Oh yes, I mean the flag officer of his generation. Really, I think it's fair to say. And I mean, when people start talking about you running for president, it's in itself a great tribute. But you know, I do feel badly. I feel this is a man who's given 35 years, more now, 2 years at CIA, of his career, of his life for his country in public service. And Ronald Reagan said a lot of things, some of which were wise, and one of the really dumb things he said is that the best minds are not in government. If any were, business would hire them away. Well, David Petraeus and a lot of other people in civilian and military, really great minds and great public servants. And I just want to kind of think about that right now and be grateful for the service he's rendered to his country.
Stunning thing.
Yeah, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him about what it was like to be the CIA. I knew he had loved the military and loved his service in the military. I was just curious what he thought, and he spoke about the people in the CIA in such awestruck terms, their quality, and especially the idea that they're all doing it in secret, and no one will ever know what they do, and sort of that admiration for the service, which he embodied. But you know, I think the Greeks understood this, that the very qualities that made him a great general make you a charismatic hero. And that attracts people, and it also, you know, being a charismatic hero for so many years, you know, you probably get a little puffed up vision of yourself as well. So this is an old story. And so he, you know, I think in general, if he hadn't been head of the intelligence agency, he could have survived this. But when you're head of the CIA, this is not permissible. And so I'm confident he'll go on to do something important. And, you know, one of the things he spoke about was maybe running a research group, and he has a PhD. And I think that would be a useful way to spend his life.
And we heard the tribute to him from the folks, the gentleman, the colonel who Ray interviewed a minute ago.
That's right.
So let's talk about this issue that the president spoke about today, and Speaker Boehner, the budget, the taxes, the fiscal cliff. Mark, the president, it seems to me, is drawing a line, as he has before, and he said, whatever it is, it's got to include taxes on the wealthy. The speaker is saying exactly what he did before. It can include taxes on the wealthy. So where do you see this going?
I see it going to demolition derby. I mean, we're in a little bit of a game of chicken right now with the date pending at the end of the year, and with a lame duck Congress with members who are leaving, who were defeated, who are retiring. But I think that there's very few things we could say came out of this campaign of 2012. I mean, there weren't any 9-point programs by either the president or Governor Romney, but no one can argue that Barack Obama did not stand clearly and unequivocally for raising the taxes on those earning over $250,000, just as Mitt Romney stood for repealing Affordable Care Act. I mean, those were sort of the two linchpins. So the president does have, I think, a legitimate point of view. The speaker acknowledges that we're going to have to raise revenues. And I thought the conversation between Bob Corker, the Republican from Tennessee, and Ben Cardin of Maryland, just both reelected, was the most encouraging that I've heard in a long time.
Well, Corker put it in terms of closing loopholes.
Right. The Senate is not the problem here. If it was up to the Senate, we'd have a deal. And I do think there's room for revenue. There's a distinction that Boehner makes between raising the rates, which the president wants to go up to 39.5 or 6, and keeping the rates the same, but closing loopholes to get more revenue that way out of the rich. You can't really get as much revenue that way. But so there's some room for a deal. I'm just struck by how complicated it is. You know, Corker kept talking about entitlement reform, and he's right, that's absolutely necessary, but that is a phenomenally complicated thing to do. And then on the other side, to close loopholes or even to raise rates, you probably have to do some big tax reform. Well, in 1986, when they did tax reform, you had some incredibly skilled legislative craftsmen, Bob Packwood and Danny Rostenkowski, who also had their personal failings, but it took them 2 years. And these are the people at the top of their game, and in a non-polarized body. And so I'm just struck by the incredible difficulty of what's ahead of us. And so I'm a pessimist. I think we're going to go over the cliff, at least for some time. Everybody's taxes will go up, and they're going to play some real brinksmanship.
But is it made any easier, Mark, that the president was reelected? As you're suggesting, he did have a mandate on this particular question.
I think it does. I think the president has a tactical advantage, Judy, and that is, you have to understand this about Republicans. Ronald Reagan did sign, in fact, 11 tax increases while he was in the White House in his 8 years. But he had, he was Mr. Conservative, so he was given some latitude. George Herbert Walker Bush, president in 41, facing the deficits, really ballooning deficits at the time, unprecedented deficits, collaborated with Democrats in Congress and with some Republicans and passed a tax increase. He paid dearly for it. The country got fiscal health out of it, but he paid. He got a primary challenge, and he got the wrath of a lot of the base of the Republican Party, and he lost re-election. Bill Clinton then came, and again, to restore to sustain fiscal health, increased taxes without a single Republican voting for it. And what happened? He paid a price. The Democrats lost control of the Congress after having it for 40 years in 1994. And the lesson that was learned by Bush 43, who came and cut taxes twice. Now, under Bush 41 and Clinton, we had sustained economic growth and fiscal sanity.
With higher tax rates.
With higher tax rates. Under Bush 43, with 2 tax cuts, we had an economy in torpor, and we doubled the national debt. And but it's become an article of faith, and David can explain it, the Republicans, that you don't go near a tax increase of any sort.
I'm still thinking about the word torpor. I haven't heard that in a little while. First, couple things to say. First, we had marginal rates have been, over the last 100 years, have been all over the place, up to 90, 70, and basic revenues have been the same. They've been around 18 for basically decade after decade. So there's always been a way to get around the marginal rates. Second, I actually agree with Mark on this one. The idea that business is booming at 30 when the top rate is 36 but would collapse at 39 is just not supported by any actual evidence. And so a marginal rate difference of that much, I don't think would make a big difference. And if it was up to me, you'd go up there. When you get up around 45, 50, then you really are setting in some perverse incentives. So I basically agree that it wouldn't be that economically harmful. But it is an article of faith that the government is already too big and Republicans don't want to give more. One of the reasons I should say I think I'm pessimistic is not only because the Tea Party is still there and they're still pretty good at putting primary challenges to Republicans, but this time, even though the president I think does have somewhat of a mandate, the left is much more organized and much less willing to compromise. So a lot of people on the left say, hey, we gave it the office. We've already had some serious spending cuts last time. Now it should just be tax revenue. The president, in his Des Moines Register interview, said $2.50 in spending cuts for every dollar in tax revenue. I really do not think the Democratic Party is going to accept that ratio. They're going to want 1 to 1 or 1 to 0. And so I think a lot more Democrats are willing to walk off the cliff.
And so what does that mean?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure they are. David may well be right. I will say this: the president does have a real tactical advantage. I mean, because the Republicans have all signed this pledge and they're against it. If we just go to the 31st December, taxes automatically increase. So then, whatever he came in with a plan, Republicans could say they are voting for a tax cut. Right. Okay, when he comes in and then with closing the loopholes. I mean, I think the initiative has to be with the president, and it has to be in total collaboration with the Congress, and that's both parties. It's not just the president and the speaker, or the president and Harry Reid, but it's got to be Republicans in the Senate. It's got to be Democrats in the House.
Basically saying we'll let the Bush tax cuts expire
for
the middle class and anybody
let
below.
them go up, and they go up, and then you commit it, and you're Lochinvar. You're writing a tax cut, even if it does close a lot of loopholes. And Bob Corker made the point, although it's not enough to raise revenues, but you make people at the high income choose what they want in the way of their tax expenditures. Do they want to give it all to the university, their alma mater? They want to give it to medical science in charitable form, or the church, or do they want to buy that new Mitt Romney house in the West Coast?
Can I just make one point that will be germane to a lot of viewers, I think? One of the likely ways to close loopholes, you don't tell people which loophole you're going to close. Yep. You say you can deduct up to this amount.
That's right.
And so my big fear is people will take the mortgage deduction, but there'll be no money left over for the charitable deduction. And charitable giving, including the PBS, will just plummet. And I think that's a real danger that people who care about private philanthropy in this country should be thinking about over the next year.
And that's a formula that, again, we heard Senator Corker talk about, putting a cap on it. So before, we've got a few minutes left, but I want to show something to our viewers now. On the day after the election, the president went over to his campaign headquarters in Chicago, and he talked to the volunteer. I guess some of them are paid, some of them are volunteers. And I want to show people what he said and get comments from the two of you. Here's what the president said on Wednesday.
I'm absolutely confident that all of you are going to do just amazing things in your lives. And what Bobby Kennedy called the ripples of hope that come out when you throw a stone in a lake, that's going to be you. I'm just looking around the room and I'm thinking, wherever you guys end up, in whatever states, in whatever capacities, whether you're in the private sector, the non-for-profit, or some of you decide to go into public service, you're just going to do great things. And that's why, even before last night's results, I felt that the work that I had done in running for office had come full circle. Because what you guys have done means that the work that I'm doing is important. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of all of you. And what you described.
Well, you could see he was tearing up there, David. That's not a sign of the president he's shown very much of before.
Yeah, some of it is fatigue, some of it is stress, but I think the big thing there, and what he talked about at the beginning before that little segment, was his own life as a young community organizer, not doing so good, but really being affected by that process and seeing people out there that were sort of doing that course, though, as he said, more smarter and more effective than him. And so what was nice about it was it wasn't, oh, we won this election, yahoo, we won. It was about the life courses of the people in that room, the young people in that room. And it was a very nice moment as he talked really much more about them than about him. And I think that's really, passing it on, generativity, that got him moved.
A couple of quick points, Judy. First of all, we don't see an emotional Barack Obama. He's a very cool customer in public. We see the big smile, and we see occasional pursed lips to express either solemnity or displeasure. But that's about the register and the range of emotions we've seen. What we saw there, I think, yes, partly fatigue, but obviously authentic and genuine. At that event, talking to one of the young people there who I know who's worked the last 18 months, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, the president went to each of the people, 700, individually, and hugged and shook hands with each one of them. And it was quite an incredible moment for them. But obviously, this was something that he felt as well as just expressed verbally.
We only have a little bit of time, but why do we think he hasn't shown that side of himself before?
He's never been the angry black man. That Barack Obama rose to political prominence and success in this country, controlling his emotions. He's got a wonderful smile, and the smile is quite disarming and engaging and really winning. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't show the dark side. There's never the scowl. There's never the loss of temper, even very rarely raising a voice. And I think it had to be just an act of incredible discipline as part of his political career. Yeah,
I guess I think he has a writer's personality, and I mean that as a compliment, actually, that it's a little detached and a little more aloof, but it was nice to see it there.
Extraordinary piece of tape. And David Brooks and Mark Shields, an extraordinary week from the two of you. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Mark and David keep up the talk on the doubleheader recorded in our newsroom. That will be posted at the top of the rundown later tonight.